Thank you all for coming. As you know, the state of Hawaii had submitted testimony in the docket before the Public Utilities Commission on the proposed merger with NextEra and Hawaii Electric Company. And the state, in all of the testifiers, took the position of opposing the merger as currently proposed. I just wanted to emphasize, state of Hawaii wants to invite capital investment into our state. We do understand why it's important. As you know, state has made a commitment to a future for electricity generation that is 100% renewable. No other state in the country has taken that position. So from my perspective, the challenge and the opportunity that the utilities in Hawaii have is not matched anywhere else in the country. The state is taking the position of opposing the merger as proposed. We had committed to a 360-degree review of the proposed merger, and all of the consultants and state personnel had independently reviewed the documents and testimonies submitted, and they all independently came to the same conclusion that it's in the state's best interest to oppose the merger as proposed. And we stand committed to proceeding. I think on a lot of different fronts, and you can certainly review the testimony submitted. They're all available to the public. Some of it talked about not having a great fit, the fit between NextEra and the goal of 100% renewable seemed opposed in many instances. There were many concerns raised by the testifiers that the burden of proof is on the proposed merger to prove that the merger is in the best interest of Hawaii and the ratepayers. And clearly the feeling of the testimonies presented to this point did not attain that level. We do believe that we are still relatively early in the process. I know the PUC had set up a number of further actions on this docket. We are committed to ensuring that the states and the people of Hawaii's interest is advocated as part of this proceeding. I'm ready to take any questions that you might have.
Governor, are there ways that you or that your administration would approve of this merger? Are there things that the two entities can do to satisfy your concerns?
Well, if you look at and I would invite you to look at all of the documents filed as part of the proceeding. There were many direct questions posed to the proposed merger that was not responded to adequately. So I think that that's a starting point. The state was very clear about the questions that they had and the concerns raised. If you review the questions, I think they speak for themselves, the responses to the questions.
But can you give us a general idea of what NextEra needs to do to gain your support?
Well, I think that there is a lot that will happen in the process. Clearly, this is a proceeding that is currently between the Public Utilities Commission. We have completed the first exchange of evidence. We'll be getting into that next phase of testimonies, and the state's testimony was really based on that initial exchange. Obviously, there'll be presentations and cross-examinations of those testimonies. And many of the points are included in the testimony. You can read them for yourselves. I certainly did spend the time over the weekend looking at the testimonies presented. So there were specific questions. For example, what's the proposed merger's commitment to the 100% renewable? And I think the responses to that question was vague and non-committal, to say the least.
Governor, is there a difference between the renewable energy portion of your decision and the cost of energy in Hawaii? Are these two separate things, or do they blend together on you?
I think, as I stated at the beginning, we are looking holistically at the proposed merger. So it's besides the pure business transaction, and if you look at Scott Hefling's testimony on the pure dynamics of the business transaction, he talks about corporate culture and corporate goals of NextEra versus what the state's vision is, and clearly identifies that the corporation is not aligned with what the state is pursuing. But there were testimony by the Office of State Planning, for example, to talk about the impact on the people and the corporate giving and the engagement of the members from community. There's testimony that talks about the loss of control, about the utility assets in Hawaii becoming part of a company significantly larger and growing, and what the impact or what the consideration of issues in Hawaii would be to a board housed 5,000 miles away or so. So I think the whole notion of loss of local control of decision making on the corporation, with the misfit on the business activities, the impact of the community involvement and engagement of the employees.
Governor, now that the state has opposed the merger, are you beginning to look more into a public acquisition or alternative models for the utility?
Well, this docket is before the PUC, and there remains many steps before a final decision is made. And clearly, the state is ready to continue to advocate and ask the questions that I think this proposed merger does demand. As I said before, there is no other utility in the country that is like Hawaiian Electric Company. There is no other state like Hawaii, and clearly we are looking for a partner that shares our hopes and dreams in terms of an electricity generation as a utility going forward.
So Governor, is this an either or, win-lose situation?
I mean, as I said, we are taking the position that the merger as proposed at this point is unacceptable. And the responses given to the specific questions and challenges raised were not satisfactory. And there will be many more opportunities to clarify positions or, provide mitigating responses. But if you look at the testimony, especially those of witness Robago and witness Hempling, they talk about the track record of NextEra in terms of compliance and utility compliance. And they talk about the notion that the burden of proof really should be on the proposants about whether the merger is in the best interest of the community and state of Hawaii.
But the state maintains an open mind going forward?
We will run through the process. There will be lots, I assure you, by the time this proceeding is ended, there will be thousands of additional pages of testimony that will be offered and submitted on both sides through the process.
So it sounds like you're leaving the door open for a potential agreement among the parties.
Well, I mean, I think that there will be lots of decisions that will be made as we move forward. I think the state has very well stated its concern in its testimonies presented, and we will see. I did not have a chance, I have to confess. I know that there are more interveners than just the state of Hawaii, and I have not had the opportunity to review all of the testimony presented by the various interveners. But it would be interesting to see what their conclusions are, and as I said, the process will continue.
Governor, if the process is going to continue, then why now? Why was this taken at this point in the process?
Because the testimony of the Department of the State was due on Monday. And so clearly, although they acted independently, I was certainly aware of what their conclusions were. And I thought that it was important because I knew if I didn't have this press conference and you read their testimony, that you would be here asking me what did I mean by the State Department of Business Economic Development and taking the positions that they did.
So Governor, you're happy with Hawaiian Electric's plans and what they'll mean for the state's future?
Well, there are several very important proceedings before the PUC. I think many of us in policy, and I sat in the legislature and now as chief executive, are concerned about a lot of the decisions being made by the utility. We have been advocating for a change in business model. We do understand that the traditional model of a vertically integrated utility really doesn't work in the new era of distributed generation. The challenge is how do we best effectuate that transformation? And obviously, it takes a business a lot longer to transition from that business model and the investments that they've made to what we believe is necessary going forward. And I think that the PUC has, I believe, 3 or 4 dockets that deal with interconnection standards and a number of other issues that have been initiated by the legislature in many instances to try to facilitate and encourage the business transformation. And like I said, if you read through the testimony, that's one of the points, is that if you look at what we believe the business model should be for utility and electric utility in Hawaii, it really is one that encourages distributed generation. It encourages personal ability to generate their own electricity off of their rooftops. It requires smart grid. It requires a change of the business model to allow for returns on transmission separate from the utility. And it does require a model of distributed generation as well, all which are opposite to the business model embraced by NextEra.
As well as HECO.
As well as HECO. But HECO's here, right?
And should this deal fall apart, then what's the message going forward?
Well, I will see what happens. I am aware that there may be others interested. What we would be looking for in a partner, and if you read through the testimony, it lays it out pretty clearly. I think what the state of Hawaii wants to look for is a partner as a utility that shares our vision of 100% renewable, that embraces the notion of the new business model, which is distributed generation from individuals to utility scale, that looks at a way to facilitate distribution of energy. The challenge of storage is always real, and we need to solve the challenge of storage in order for us to reach that goal. But we clearly are committed to evaluating how the electric utility in the state of Hawaii has to operate in this new environment.
But you have 2 partners that are stuck in paradigm paralysis. So how do you move forward?
Well, we'll see how the docket proceeds. Like I said, I think we're 6 months into the process. I know that there's been varying discussions about what the timetable is. This was the first opportunity for the state in the various participants to state its case and its position based on the evidence provided up until this point. And there will be an exchange of further clarification and questions and a direct testimony that will occur. So I'm certain that this isn't the last page written on this merger. and there'll be lots of information that will be exchanged on a going forward basis.
Governor, so you believe that your position as the governor will change the decision or maybe the action of the Public Utility Commission?
Well, I do know that we are active in participants in the merger discussion. And, the Public Utilities Commission is to really take all of the inputs from the various stakeholders. As you are aware, they have approved 28 interveners, 27 or 28 interveners in this case. So they certainly are other opinions. As I said, I didn't have a chance to review all of the testimony provided. I did review all the state's testimony.
Governor, can you give us an update on what the state is doing about the homeless problem in Kaka'ako?
We continue to look for solutions. We've been having meetings with all of the state agencies, looking for alternatives. Homelessness is a very complex issue. And we do know that decisions made in one location impacts others. So I do believe that it has to be a comprehensive solution that involves state, federal, and local governments. And that we need to look at how we can better coordinate and integrate services so that we can deliver better services to the community. The challenge is that, for example, we do have homeless shelters today that have vacant spaces that homeless people are not willing to accept. So, it's really looking at what the requirements are and trying to find solutions that they would find acceptable.
Would you characterize, our sources are telling us that there is a general agreement between the city and state about how to proceed, but you're still working toward a specific plan, potentially sending folks, moving them out of where they are now near the Children's Discovery Center into some OHA land in the Kaka'ako area. Is there a general agreement, but you're working out the specifics?
Well, I think we are looking at all alternatives. We are trying to, for example, survey all state properties and see which properties might be appropriate. We've had conversations. I've had personal conversations with many representatives and council members, with homeless issues in their communities. I do believe it's about looking for solutions in each and every community. I used to run a lot in Pearl City on Blaisdell Park, and there was a growing homeless encampment there. They're under the underpasses in HEI and Pearl City. So they definitely have expanded to more than the typical places. And we do know that once you start enforcing in one area, they have a tendency to move to others. And so we want to be coordinated. Kaka'ako is a bigger challenge because of the varying ownership in properties. OHA and HCDA has been involved. There's been conversations with Kamehameha schools as well. So, we continue to work to find solutions that I think everyone can support.
Governor, have you decided on your homelessness coordinator?
Nope, we're still working on that too. I know that I've asked for all of the state employees for evaluations of performances. And so we are working through that process.
But is it safe to say that you're warming toward this idea of safe zones, areas that are not quite emergency shelters, not quite transitional shelters, but
Well, I do think that the philosophy of housing first works. If we can provide a shelter and deliver services, mental health, substance abuse, job training, services that we have a better opportunity for success. The question is, how do you get the homeless from being on the street to being willing to accept a position in a shelter? And that's the challenge. Some people prefer to be on the streets, and we have an obligation as the state and city to enforce, especially when it impacts health and safety and the ability of businesses to do business. So, we are working with the city to coordinate And we continue to look for state properties, and we're asking the city to do the same. I do believe that the solution will require us finding space in each and every community because homelessness is pervasive.
And do you think that the solution specifically in this tent city that's right by the Children's Discovery Center there, just, a block away from the med school, will that have to be broken down and the people moved out of there? Is there no question in your mind that that has to happen?
Well, they certainly are on the street, on the sidewalks and the street. So, I think like other homeless, where it begins to impact on public access, certainly there, we need to assure that the public has access to those facilities as well.
So you're not comfortable letting them stay there where they are now?
Well, I mean, they're all over there in Market City. I mean, all of those encampments, we are, developing a better process of enforcement. We've been working with Department of Transportation, Department of Health, Department of Human Services to really look at what services are in place, what additional contracts we might need to issue, and then what's the process of dealing with enforcement and coordinating that activity.
Governor, in Taka'ako, is there any timeframe in terms of coming up with a solution of potentially moving people?
Well, I guess as we've gotten into this, become fully aware that whenever you're within that special management area close to the coastline, it does require a lot more approvals and permitting. So certainly a solution for Kaka'ako is a challenge because you have to work through all of those issues. When you talk about hygiene and other kinds of support facilities that would be required, it certainly becomes even more complicated about trying to ensure that we have access to water, electricity, and those kinds of things on each of the sites.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.